welcome to In the News for June the 10th, 2022. I am Brett Burney from appsandlaw.com.
And this is Jeff Richardson from iPhone JD. What a week, huh, Brett?
Wow.
Lots of announcements.
Wow. There is so much. And I was trying to think about how are we going to cover everything. And, in one way, these are things that were announced by Apple this week. And so we're not going to see some of these maybe for several months. We don't know the exact timing on it. But I thought today, since there is a lot in here that I think our listeners would really like to listen to, Jeff, that we could just maybe walk through some of the big announcements from the Worldwide Developers Conference that Apple began. They opened it on this Monday, and I think this whole week, right? The developers have been in around Cupertino in California, and they have been going deep dive into some of the sessions for developers from Apple's WWDC this week. And wow, the keynote on Monday was absolutely incredible.
Yeah, you mentioned that the developers are in Cupertino, and a few of them are. But before we get into the specifics of the announcements, it's sort of interesting how Apple did the announcements this week, because they have done WWDC so many different ways. And this article that you're showing from Jason Snell of Macworld describes it. Sometimes they had them in San Francisco, sometimes they had them in a convention center in San Jose, and so now they were on campus, which was a decision that was probably done because of COVID. But as Jason notes in the articles, in some ways it was the best way to do it. It meant that there were fewer spots, so fewer developers could be there live. But as he pointed out, there are millions and millions of Apple developers all over the world, and only a tiny percentage of them could ever even get to California in the first place. And so it really makes sense for them to have an online video, version of all of the developer announcements. So why not de-emphasize the being there in person part, although it's still there if you want it. But I thought it was interesting that he talked about how it was such a treat for the folks to actually be in Apple's house, in Apple Park there, because this is something that Apple does not do. I don't know if folks know this, but Apple's original Infinite Loop campus, you could get onto that. I've been to Infinite Loop before.
Me too.
A friend of mine invited me. I've actually had lunch at Infinite Loop, and I remember looking across and I saw just a few tables away Steve Jobs and Johnny Ives having lunch too. But this the new campus that Apple has. Hi, how y'all doing? The new campus that they have, the Apple Park, the spaceship, people call it, the big circle.
Spaceship.
You don't go on that campus unless you work at Apple. So to have any outside people on that portion of the campus, not the Steve Jobs Theater, which is outside of it, but within the circle, is something new. And I think it made it feel special for these people, because it was special. And I think that was nice that Apple did that. So again, the real meat of the announcement was the substance of it, but just the way that Apple did it on Monday, it looked like it was really nice.
Yeah, just real quick to say that so many people that we know have talked about over the last 2 or 3 years, really, when Apple went all virtual, right? There was nobody live. That really helped, I think, to deliver maybe some of the sessions and the educational content to a lot more people. But, then it wasn't live, so they didn't have to stage anything, and they could pre-record some of the stuff. And so this was almost a hybrid. I mean, you can see this picture I'm showing here, that there's half the people that are in the middle of the Infinite Loop, right? Or somehow it's bleeding in, and half the people are inside, and they're looking at these huge screens. But if you were there live, Tim Cook and Craig Federici, I think, came out live for like a few minutes, right? And just then the rest of it was all video.
They just watched the same video that we all watched.
Right,
exactly.
Right, exactly. Which is just, to me, would have been odd. But man, I think I would have given the tip of my right pinky to be on campus there, because it just looks so great. People were talking about how the chairs were just beautiful, and it was a sunny day. Anyway, very, very cool. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how we're going to go from there. But like you said, Jason's article here was just talking about the different ways that Apple has changed over the years, and maybe they're not done yet. We'll see where they go on that. Okay, well, let's start from the top, Jeff. And how about let's just knock out a couple of things right at the top here, which I don't think a lot of people would be that interested in, although some of us. Let's talk about new hardware, which is typically not announced at the WWDC, because this is for developers, right? You have usually a spring event and a fall event where we see new iPhones and new stuff, but there was at least one standout. And you linked to an article here, even from David Sparks, where the new piece of hardware was a brand new MacBook Air, but it doesn't stop there. we had the M1 chip, and now we have the M2, which is really just bigger, better, faster, and flashier.
Yeah, the M1 chip last year was just so far beyond what Intel was doing that it really was a substantial improvement for Apple. This year, the M2, it's an improvement. Nothing wrong with improvements. You're going to have improvements from time to time. It's 10% faster at this, 20% faster at this. You would fully expect things to get better over time. It's easier to get more memory and stuff like that. There's some nice changes to it, but nothing earth-breaking. But it's exactly what you would hope to have the next year, something a little bit better. So if you didn't get an M1 MacBook Air last year, now you can get an M1 MacBook Air this year. And not only does it have the M2, but it also has a new design that's super thin, and it looks really beautiful. So for folks that are looking for it, I think it goes on sale in maybe a month. If you're looking to get a MacBook Air for yourself or for a college student or a high school student, there's a fantastic new model coming out.
Yeah. My first thought is, it's really incredible to see the speed at which Apple is progressing with these new processors. I mean, I remember when Apple transitioned, we talked about this before, from the old IBM Power PC processors, right, to the Intel. And I mean, there was a lot of heartbreak and anguish when that happened. And now going from Intel to M1, it's just been so smooth for so many people. But I would agree with you. I've heard this from several folks now. The M2 is incredible. I think we knew that was going to be eventually, we'll see in Apple. I don't see how they're going to get off this road now. They're just going to continue to release some amazing hardware here that is just going to get faster. But if you didn't get an M1, if you did get an M1, I'm perfectly happy still with the M1 MacBook Pro that I have. But if you're still on an older Intel based Mac, then this is no question. Like, it's definitely an upgrade on there. But anyway, that's about it on the hardware side, right? I mean, there is actually a new MacBook Pro, but it's still kind of based on the older model of the MacBook Pro. I'm not really sure. It was a little weird.
I wouldn't recommend it unless you know that you need it for a specific purpose. If you're going to get a new Mac right now and want to get one of these new models, the ones to look at is the MacBook Air. And if you're looking for something more powerful, if you really want like a nice MacBook Pro that takes advantage of the M2 processor, hold on a couple of months. I suspect it'll be out later this year.
Agreed. The only other piece of hardware, maybe we'll come back to this, is an iPhone dock or a holder.
Yeah, well, even that's not from Apple. It's from Belkin.
I know.
We'll circle around to
I know. Okay, we'll come back to that. Okay, so that's the hardware. That's it. Good. Number we check off the list. The next thing, let's talk about. Apple announced a brand new version of the Mac operating system. So we'll talk through this just real quick. We all kind of expected this. This is called macOS Ventura. Just going to continue to go down the California coastline there. And there's some really nifty things that are coming here. But I got to tell you, the biggest takeaway here, Jeff, we don't have to get into details too much on this, but the biggest takeaway is all of the updates I see in the Mac OS is getting reflected in the iOS, in the iPadOS. Maybe not everything, but like improvements on mail. They were talking about improvements on messages, improvements on searching, improvements on the Safari and photos. And I'm like, well, that's all great. I want that in my Mac. But all of that, sounds like it's also coming to maybe your iPhone and your iPad as well.
Yeah, I was curious what you were going to say about Ventura, and it's good minds think alike, Brett, because that's my view too. There are some nice new features, but the one thing that I'm seeing here is you sort of get the sense that for every new feature Apple looked at doing on the Mac, somebody sort of was whispering in their ear, wait a minute, can you also be doing this on the iPad? And to a certain degree, the iPhone too. It's nice that now we have all of the Mac systems are using that same chip that we just talked about, the M1 and now the M2. And now on the software side too, we're seeing sort of this cohesion. Things are moving together, which is fantastic. If Apple's going to put the resources into coming out with a great new feature, let's spend the slightly additional extra amount of resources to see if there's a way to bring it to the iPhone or the iPad. And because of the similar screen sizes, there's often a way to bring it on the iPad. So that was my big takeaway for Ventura.
Good. Okay, done. So we talked about hardware. We talked about the Mac OS, and there's a lot more good things coming in, but I just don't think we need to spend time on it, because what we really want to get to is your post that you did. You did two incredible posts this week, Jeff, in addition to your In the News post. But here is why lawyers will love iOS 16. So we usually anticipate this every summer at WWDC is when Apple will announce, here are our plans for the next version of the iOS, the operating system that runs on your iPhone, and the iPadOS. So let's put the iPad just slightly to the side for just a moment, and let's go through your post here about why lawyers and others, frankly, all business professionals will love iOS 16. Boy, did Apple spend a lot of time on these announcements on Monday.
Sure. I mean, and you can't have incredibly major announcements every year. I don't know that any company would have the resources for that. So you end up having some years that are bigger and some years that are smaller. And I really think this is a bigger year. There are some lots and lots of small improvements that we've been waiting for a long time. Apple finally cleared the deck and got all of them taken care of. And then there are some big changes to how everything works. I mean, it's one of the smaller ones. The one that I started with in my post was the Messages app. People have been, I mean, the Messages app is so incredibly
small but
popular.
Big. Jeff,
right?
It's huge.
I think I've read it's the #1 app on the iPhone and stuff like that. People use Messages all the time. And we've always wished there was a way that when you type a message and hit send and you realize there's a mistake, can't I just fix the mistake? You know, people have their little nomenclatures that they use to indicate with an asterisk or somehow that they're changing a word or something like that.
Right.
But why not just go back and edit it? And so now, when iOS 16 comes out, we'll have that ability. You've got 15 minutes to edit your message or even to delete it. And the other person will see an indication that it was deleted. If the other person is not using iOS 16, if they're using an older operating system for the iPhone, or for that matter, if it's an Android person, then this is not going to work. But if everybody is using the new operating system, which, most people do update, and over time, everybody will be there on the iPhone inside.
We see
then
those
we'll get
numbers
to a point where people can fix things. So I don't think that you'll be able to use it for nefarious purposes to like delete the incriminating text after the fact that could have been used as evidence in a divorce trial, because you've only got 15 minutes to do it. But I think it's just a common sense solution to fix things. So that's a nice improvement.
That's a great one. So, and then on Messages, you wrote about this or you mentioned it here, right? You can unsend a message. Isn't that, is that the technical term?
Yeah. And, a big way that may happen is, I mean, you and I might be texting Brett, and then I may go to send something to my wife and I send it to you by accident. I'm like, oh, Brett didn't need to see that, and hopefully it's nothing too, racy.
But that happens
at least I can
all the time.
Delete it quickly, and so there, and then go put it. So it's a great solution.
Okay,
and,
so
that
you
reminds
started.
Me, since we started there, I might as well just mention that the Mail app, both on the iPhone and the iPad, has got something similar. Again, these little changes that there's a feature that, and I think Google has this, that you can use it in Gmail if you have it turned on. I don't have it turned on in Gmail, but when you hit send, it actually waits 10 seconds before the app sends it. And so during that 10 seconds, if you want to go back and say, whoa, I hit send prematurely, I need to fix something, or I want to recall it and then get it out, you can actually now do that. Now, I presume that this will work. I use Mail with Microsoft Exchange, my law firm's backend. I presume it will work with any backend. We'll have to see how it works once people start testing it. But from all indications, it looks like everybody using an iPhone will be able to use it, which will be great. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, you said it's a small thing, and it is tiny things that we're talking about, but this is huge. In fact, you even linked to Apple did a short little video GIF here about showing how to do an unsend, and man, just some really nifty things to add to the Messages. Okay. Well, I think that's probably more important. The thing that Apple, I think Tim Cook started with this, or Craig started with this, was the lock screen on your phone. And you wrote about it. Yeah, this is
the big one that you're going to see. When you pick up your phone, you just have the ability for it to look very different. And it's nice. I don't really spend too much time looking at my lock screen. For example, you can have a feature that your messages, like your text messages and your emails, show up on your lock screen. And, Brett, I've always had that turned off just because I never knew if it was a business confidential thing, and if my iPhone was sitting there and my screen was on and somebody walked by, would they be reading my messages? So I've always had it turned off. But there are definitely useful things you could put on your lock screen. And in iOS 16, you just have so many more options. I mean, the picture itself, you can very quickly swipe between different pictures. So instead of going through the current process where you have to go into settings and you change your picture, and when you have a new one, you lost the old one. Now you can just very quickly switch back and forth, much like you can switch watch faces so easily on the Apple Watch. Again, Apple does something for one of their platforms and they're inspired by it and they bring it to another platform. So so that will be just, that will be something sort of nice from a cosmetic standpoint. But Apple is also bringing little miniature widgets to the lock screen so that you can, just by glancing at your lock screen, you can see information. And the one that I actually am most excited about, which Apple has already said will not come out with the first version of iOS 16, it'll be later this year, but it's called Live Activities. And it's the idea that if you have something that would normally send you a bunch of updates, like, the Uber driver letting you know he's getting closer and closer, or like an order, or a sports score,
a sports game,
maybe you want to follow a game, but you don't want to get updates every 5 seconds when the scores change in a basketball game, or every couple of minutes. You just want to be able to look and see whatever the most current score is, just show me that. And that's what this can do. And I think it makes perfect sense. And so that way you have this little dashboard on your iPhone screen. By the way, for now, this is all on the iPhone. You got to think that by next year, those will be on the iPad too.
I hope. That was a question. Yeah.
But I think maybe people probably use a lock screen on an iPhone more often because you're keeping the iPhone in your pocket, something you're constantly taking it out and back and forth. I suspect that most people don't look at the iPad lock screen as much as the iPhone. So there's probably good reason to put it in the iPhone first. But anyway, that's a great use. And so, you put all these things together and you'll just be able to get a lot more information just from when you first glance at your phone, which saves you time. It's more efficient.
I love it. And you said this is probably going to be the one that most people enjoy. And frankly, they did a good job of showing, I liked your word, cosmetic. I mean, you can have a picture. Now the picture can be like on top of the,
sort of 3D.
The clock. You can change the font of the clock so you can have different numerals. I mean, things like that. You immediately go to like the business uses, Jeff, which is why I love you so much, because it's like, we're thinking about that. But I know, for example, my kids are just going to love this because they can customize to the nth degree to exactly the kind of font that they like, if it's hip, and or if they if they want it to be more serious, if they want a picture on there. And anyway, this to me is sort of a long time coming, because I feel like some of this should be pretty easy to do, or it could be. That's my naivete talking probably a little bit, but I'm like, why haven't you been able to do some of this interactivity? And I think even Craig did, I think he showed even a weather app, right? Like you can have a weather lock screen where it'll update with the weather, similar to what you were just talking about, or there's even some animations on it.
Yeah,
and just in addition,
we haven't learned all the details. There are some lock screens that are more special than others. If I put a picture of my kids on the lock screen, I don't think it's going to be animating. But he did show off one that, when there's lightning outside, you actually see lightning on the screen. So
he was very proud of that. He seemed to be very proud.
Will get special privileges to perhaps do a little bit more. We'll have to see how that all works out when it's all revealed.
And the notifications will look a little bit different. Like you said, this remains to be seen. But man, I'm just glad. Like I know people will just love it because they'll have that phone. And you're right. I just did some traveling earlier this week, and sure enough, that Uber, it was just all notifications, just ping, 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 ping. And I just wish it would have shown on my lock screen. So yeah, I welcome this on this. All right, next, how about Mail? You already mentioned a couple of the options.
Mentioned some
there,
of them. I mean, just to step back a little bit, besides the specific features, what's nice is that Apple has not really done much with Mail in a while.
Yeah,
and so
looks the same.
You've sort of been like, you've sort of forgotten about it. And I know that some people frustrated with that started to turn to third-party mail clients on their iPhone, which was good for some features, but it didn't work quite as well. So I'm glad that Apple has returned attention to Mail, and let's just pump it with some new features like we talked about. So that'll be nice.
I think people were talking like the search function for some reason, like that got a little bit of a
and this is a system-wide thing. This is something that Apple emphasized, that there were some things that they changed that once you change it, because different apps use it, it's better for everybody. And so search is a feature that whether you're searching in your calendar or your mail or whatever else, Apple says that it's much faster. It gives you results that are much more relevant.
Right.
As you start to type letters, it's instantly updating what it's showing you. And so the idea is that you only have to, type a little bit and you can get directly to what you're looking for. And so that will be great. Another little feature in Mail is a send later feature. So, I mean, I think of it as a late night feature. If, you send you write an email late at night, but you don't want the person to get it in the middle of the night.
The regret feature. Yeah.
Send this at 9 a.m. or something like that. So you're done with it and it gets sent when it gets sent. So there's all sorts of little features like that, which is just going to make Mail more useful. I love it.
And some of these, I'll point this one out specifically, something like that, like a regret, or send or unsend, or I mean, some of these have been available. You already mentioned Gmail and other email apps, so it's almost, this is one of those things. I know some people will point their finger at Apple and say it's about time you should have had this included, but Apple works at their own speed on some of these things, and I'm glad that it's going to be incorporated here. All right, so in your post, you mentioned CarPlay. We'll come back to that in just a little bit, because wow, that's good. Apple Maps, typically there's always a few improvements, some updates on the Apple Maps, which is, I think, going to be nice. And then you mentioned the Home app down here in your post, Jeff.
Yeah, this is a nice one. The Home app, which you use for your HomeKit devices in your house, or in your office, if you use it there, you can use it anywhere. It's got a brand new interface that's, it used to all be focused just on the room. What's in this room? What's in that room? What's in another room? Right. But this new interface can be focused on lots of different things. It can be focused on categories. It can be focused on, things that are relevant in different scenes and different types of devices. So it just seems like it's going to be much easier to quickly get to what you want to get to, which is what it's all about, right? So that's fantastic. And then Apple also, I didn't even put this in my post this week, but Apple announced that, and this is nothing new. We knew this was coming, but Apple was reaffirming that they were part of the Matter Alliance with other companies like Google and Amazon and everyone else, which means that you'll be able to get to the point where you're not going to have to say, oh, well, this device only works with the Echo ecosystem.
Right.
And this one is HomeKit, and this one is Amazon. And, you get to the point, or whatever, this one's Google. You get to the point where everything can work with everything. So the iOS 16 will be Matter compatible. This will be the first iOS operating system that fully works with Matter, and I'm very curious what it will mean out of the box, because you could been able to purchase accessories that should work with Matter for a little while now. There's a lot of uncertainty in my mind as to how it's going to all work immediately, like this fall, but somebody has to, something has to start. So step one's going to be Apple's going to be ready for it, and then hopefully other manufacturers will be ready for it. And wouldn't it be great if a year from now the world of home accessories just works so much better just because of Matter? Plus you have the nicer interface in the Home app. So I think this is great stuff.
Dictation, Siri dictation.
Yeah.
Bring it on. I love it. You just had 2 little paragraphs here, but man, that's going to be huge, I think. Hugely helpful, I should say.
Yeah, because it's so much faster often to talk than to type, right? Especially on the little keyboard on the iPhone, but even on the iPad too. And for a while, I wasn't sure about using Siri dictation because the translation took place off the device, security. But now it all takes place on device, so that concern's gone away.
Good.
And in the iOS 16, you will be able to talk and use the keyboard at the same time. So, you know how it is now. When you talk, the whole screen is basically just listening to you. That's it. But now you can be talking while you're also sort of fixing things. And you can go back and forth between some words you're going to type because maybe it's a technical word that Siri's not going to get. So you're going to type that one word, but then continue to dictate with the other words with Siri. It just looks like it's going to be much cleaner and work much nicer.
I'm excited to look for it. In fact, you and I were just talking about another podcast that Max Sparky, David Sparks does. And you know, we both know he's a very big fan of dictation, and he's been doing this for years and years on the IBM, you know, Via Voice and everything way back in the day. And so I'm excited to see him get his hands on some of this and see. I don't know how that's going to work with the dictating at the same time I have a keyboard, but it just seems like it's just going to be kind of an all-in-one. Like, I'm just thrilled to see that dictation is getting a little bit better and better as it goes along. This is
so useful.
Exactly. And this is an article you linked to from MacStories, Federico, who was there at the event. So was David Sparks, by the way.
Federico was in Italy. He was not at the event.
Okay. He just watched it. Well, he talked about something else I wanted to talk about. I don't know if you had this in your post. Live text from video. We've talked about live text from photos, being able to take the text out of photos, but now you can pause a video. Am I right?
That's right.
And if it has text on it, and grab the text from that. Wow.
That's a really cool feature, and I could see that being useful if you've got a video of a presentation and, you know, just for a brief second it shows something on the screen and you just want to copy that text and paste it somewhere else. Not something you'll use every day, but when you do want to use it, it'll be cool to have. While we're talking about grabbing things, and I only say this because you happen to be showing a picture of a dog on a screen, even though this is not what this is.
That's where I was going.
I'm sure you know where I'm going with this.
Absolutely.
Apple has that, you know, the Apple AI is so smart now that it can look at a picture and quickly understand what is the foreground subject and what is the background. And so and this is the trick that they use for the new home screens, that they can make the clock appear to be behind your head, because it can distinguish between the background and the foreground and make it look more 3D. So Apple is also doing the same thing, that if you have a picture that has, your child or a dog or a fire hydrant or something like that that's in the front of the picture, you can select from that picture just that portion of it and then paste it somewhere else. And you've been able to do something like this for a long time in a graphics program, right? You would do there's different names for it and different features, but whether you're removing background in Photoshop or in transparency mode, there's been different ways to do it. But to have it all happen automatically, this is incredibly sophisticated artificial intelligence that is just working, so quickly that you don't even see it happening. It's neat. People are going to find it useful, but I'm just fascinated that it's even possible.
Absolutely.
This is so cool.
Same. I'm showing this little tiny video that Federico recorded. He's showing a picture of his dogs. He's simply just tapping on the dog on his picture and then moving it, and just the dogs, not the background, just the dogs are then he's able to drag and paste into a messages or, attached to an email. Like you said, it's just mind blowing, truly, how amazing that looks. And it's all built in. It's going to be all built into iOS 16.
Yeah. And just like live text, it's all the idea of Apple saying, look, we can understand what you're seeing in this picture. We can understand what's on screen. Let's take advantage of that. And how can we take advantage of it? We can understand the text. We can understand the images. It's just really powerful.
Yeah. Good stuff. Speaking of, we talked about the live text, grabbing text. We talked about the dictation. Something else that caught my eye, and I don't know if anybody wrote about this just quite yet. Oh, maybe you did. You had somebody that was straightening up your handwriting. Am I saying that correctly?
Sure. So this is more of an iPad feature. If we want to move on.
Okay. Yeah.
We can move on now, unless there's any other iOS stuff that you want to.
Well, there's a couple more on the iPhone. You're right. That's more like on the iPad.
Yeah, go for it. What else on the iPhone you want to talk about?
I wanted to say we talked about they talked really about something called safety check. Now, I guess that might be across a lot of different platforms, but I know on the iPhone, like this is just providing some additional capabilities or protection or even maybe privacy components. Maybe that's a better word to use on it, right? That if somebody is in a position where they don't feel safe or an environment of some kind, that the Apple, they spent a few minutes talking about safety check. So we'll see how that's going to look on the iPhone.
Yeah, and I don't have any more to say about that one.
Yeah. Well, good. We'll come back to that when they do announce it. Two more things that you did link to. Contacts duplicates. Being able to quickly take out duplicates of contacts. I have a lot of people that call me and ask about this. Like, how can they just quickly get rid of duplicates? And really, the best way to do it today is just to scroll through and find two of the same names. Anyway, iOS 16 is going to have some kind of a way to be able to immediately identify duplicate contacts.
And likewise, it can also, so that's a cool feature, something that in the past required a third-party app. And then additionally, that's a natural transition into the Photos app will be able to find duplicate photos.
Yeah, so, here's a link you put in for that.
Sometimes through various different ways, you end up with the same photo twice. And, this will help you to find that and just sort of clean up your library a little bit, which is nice.
This is good. This is a story you linked to from Zac Hall, 9 to 5 Mac, which he's using duplicate photos of Craig Federighi in a tracksuit.
Yeah, this is a still image from the
video. Not only did
funny.
I like the tracksuit, but somebody was talking about, the Swift logo, which is a little bird. Somebody was saying that it looks like the Mockingjay. If you've ever listened, the Hunger from the Hunger Games.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was intentional or not, but that's just pretty incredible. Like, you can quickly go and split out duplicates on photos. Again, to your point, Jeff, there have been apps that will do this for you, that you can download some apps and they'll quickly identify, duplicate photos so you can get rid of them, so you can, reclaim some space on your phone. But now that it's getting built in and it's being based on like AI and built into Apple, again, that's pretty incredible to me. Yeah, oh my goodness. Okay. Is that it in iOS? I don't know.
I mean, it's not it. We could sit here forever. But let's move on to iPad because we could be here forever. If
I just got to say quickly, can I just say now that I have an updated iPad Pro that uses Face ID, I have been amazed that the Face ID works whether on the iPad, whether it's in landscape mode or portrait mode. And finally, thank goodness, it sounds like in iOS 16, I'll be able to do that on my iPhone now as well. No matter which way I'm holding the iPhone, the Face ID should work to unlock my phone. And I say, bring that on.
Perfect. I love it.
Okay, now is that okay? We'll stop there. How about that? Because I just keep getting more excited about everything that we have. The second article that you wrote this past week, my friend, is why lawyers and other business professionals will love iPadOS 16. So I just have to tell you, I know you and I were texting back and forth on Monday when we were both watching the keynote, and I kept thinking and saying to you, texting you, Jeff, we're 20 minutes into this and no mention of the iPad. We're 30 minutes into this, no mention of iPad. 45 minutes, almost an hour, if I'm not mistaken, goes by. They never mention the iPad other than just, in passing. And finally, toward the end, they were saving the best for last, I guess.
They did indeed.
Tim Cook and Craig comes out and they talk about the improvements they're making to iPadOS. And both you and I were expecting this, as well as a slew of others, at least hoping that Apple was going to make some fantastic improvements to the iPadOS, and it sounds like we're going to get them soon.
Yeah, this is exactly what we were hoping about on last week's podcast, that Apple would allow the iPad just to be more advanced. And, and it goes back to where we started today's podcast talking about the Mac. You really get the sense that Apple is looking at all the things a computer can do and is saying, well, why can't you just do that on an iPad as well? And there will be cases in which there are some things that you can't do for the iPad, and that's fine. There are some things that belong on the iPad and just the iPad. Some things belong on the computer, just the computer, but a lot of things in between. And so, where do you even start? There's so many different things. I mean, just a tiny one is the ability to adjust toolbars, which is a feature that some specific apps have right now, but to have it system-wide, make it more easy so that, you could adjust an app if you know that there are certain features, certain functions that you always use in a particular app, to adjust the toolbar so that you see just those buttons and little levers or whatever it is that you want to use most often. The Stage Manager feature, which when Apple on Monday showed it off for the Mac, in fact, you and I were texting each other saying, gosh, this would really be great on the iPad. And of course it is. And it's the idea that, for up until now, the only way to see two different apps at one time is to sort of have them side by side, or sort of the slide over feature. But this is going to allow sort of a true windowing experience like you used to have, we've been using on computers since the 1980s, where you can have windows on top of each other. And what I didn't understand last week when I was thinking about, on the one hand, it would be cool to have windows that overlap, but on the other hand, with the smaller size of the iPad, isn't that going to create a mess? But Apple found a solution to that, and it's this Stage Manager app that has on the left side something called the Stage, where you can either have a single window on the left side, followed one after another, or you could have little groups of windows. And so if I've got like one window that's my Microsoft Word document off to the side, and I have two windows that I use together for like my messages and something else, I can have those sort of together, and then I have a third grouping that might be my notes and also my calendar and also my contacts. I don't know what your use case is, but whatever it is that you use together, or maybe two different graphical programs, you can put them in little clusters, and then you can very, very quickly switch between one cluster of windows and work with them, or another cluster of windows and work with them. And the only way that this is powerful, to make this work, you want it to work incredibly quickly, and we'll see how it works in real life. But I have high hopes for it, because this is one of the features that Apple said they are only bringing for the newest iPads that have an M1 processor. Because they not only because they're faster, but also because they have the ability. This is a new thing coming in the iPad, and this gets a little geeky, but to use virtual memory, so it can have things in its active memory, and it can swap things out to the SSD drive and go back and forth. All that you need to know from the user standpoint is it means that you can just quickly pop in and out of things, and when you get back into your Word document, you're right where you left it. When you get back to your photos, you're right where you left it. And so these are cool. I'm just amazed that they came up with something that I did not even think about. This is why they are getting paid the big bucks to make smart decisions, really smart people. And I just can't wait to play with it and see how it works in real life. And some of it may not work. Some parts of it may work better than others, but at least they are trying to push the envelope. And this is just something really different, really great.
And each of these little windows in these clusters, I don't know if that's what they call it, but I like it. You can change the size of them, right? You can drag the corner, similar to, again, what did you say?
On the computer,
since we've been doing this since 1980 or something, right? I mean, you can change the size of these windows so that you can customize your workspace exactly the way that you want. So again, you're, like you said, you're not just limited to the two windows, that split the screen down the middle. I'm so excited to try this. I think you said in your post, I cannot wait to try this out. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see. And I know at least David Sparks, he was talking about this on his podcast, that, he's already downloaded the first beta of iPadOS 16 because, again, he's there at the developers conference, and, he's already trying it out, and we'll be seeing some folks write about this quite a bit. But, oh my goodness, if that alone was enough, I don't think that would be enough, but if that alone was what they allowed for the iPad, I think that would help tremendously. Agreed. But man, now we got more stuff. Okay, the next thing you wrote about was the ability now that the iPad can connect to an external monitor and then use that external monitor as another monitor. In other words, you can have more space on there. We haven't been able to do this before.
No, right now, if you connect your iPad to an external monitor or a TV or whatever you have, it will simply mirror what's on your iPad screen, which makes things bigger, which is nice for a presentation, I suppose, but it's not a separate workspace. But if you have a computer that has two different monitors, how you might want to have, and I'm sitting in front of a 2-monitor setup right now. I've got my, my time entries and my mail on one screen, then I've got my documents on a different screen, and you'll be able to do that with an iPad. The concept of using an iPad with an external monitor is still so foreign to me that I don't know how much I'll actually use this. But it may well be that once this is all together, I may have one of those little switches right here in my office where I might switch to A and have my monitor be with my PC and switch to B and plug my iPad into my monitor so that I can have some apps on my iPad screen and different apps on my monitor screen, and you can move things back and forth between the two. I don't know if I will do that or not, but boy, I love that it's a possibility. And who sees what comes next, and third-party developers are going to come up with creative ways to use this. And even if you don't have an external screen, they also have this new ability that you can change the pixel density on your iPad screen. So basically make things more tiny so that you can sort of see more of it. And of course, then the text becomes smaller and things are harder to read. But much like on a computer, you can adjust the dots per inch or whatever so that everything's really big, or things are small and you can see more different things. It's just nice to have this option. So until we start playing with it, who knows which one will be more useful than others. But Apple is just saying, here is everything that you could possibly do. Y'all figure out, what works best for you. They've sort of taken off the limitations, which is just fantastic.
Yeah, I when you were talking about that, I remembered I saw it somewhere, and this was the story you linked to, I think, from Federico, where he's just showing the difference, like the standard display zoom, and then if you chose to go to that more space setting, there's not a huge amount of difference, but I guarantee you, if you're using your iPad, as a work machine, just having that a little bit of additional extra space there is going to be incredibly helpful on that.
And for folks that weren't, for folks listening to the podcast as opposed to watching the video, what you were just showing, Brett, is in the regular display on the left side of the screen, the app had 3 columns of icons, but in the zoomed out view, there were 4 columns. So it was 25% more icons just on the left side of the screen. These aren't icons; these are shortcuts. And then on the right side of the screen, where he was showing a web page, the standard view with only half the iPad screen didn't quite look right. But then when things are zoomed out, it's more like you would expect the web page to look on a computer. So the idea that you could seamlessly go back and forth, I just think is great.
Yeah, very good. Okay, next. Wow. Okay, you already mentioned this one a little bit. Customizable toolbars.
Yeah, that's a great one.
It's very good. But my question was, I'm interested. Is that going to be on just Apple apps at first? Let's see. You mentioned the PDF Expert app on here.
Yeah,
right?
I think it's actually going to be available for third parties as well. Right now, when third parties want to do this, they had to basically come up with their own solution. But now my understanding is that they will be able to tap into the Apple solution, which means they can implement it so much more fast, so much more quickly, and hopefully we'll see a lot more apps using it. That's what I hope.
You only gave 1 sentence, no, 2 sentences. Sorry, I don't want to sell you short here. 2 sentences to the Files app improvements, but this is one that's near and dear to my heart. You can change file extensions now, view folder sizes. which sounds so silly. Like, well, is that a big deal? Yeah, it is. You can see the size of a file, but now you'll be able to see the size of a folder. Just little tiny tweaks like that would make my iPad experience so much better. And I think I even saw that Jason Snell was talking about how the edit menu, which is that little black bar that pops up at the top if you tap and hold on a file, like they're going to change that a little bit or make it a little bit more interactive or provide more information. Anyway, just lots of nice little tiny improvements there, which I usually see from the Files app, which hopefully will dribble down into some other apps, maybe even like the Dropbox app or something else like that as well.
In fact, Brett, one that you might like, because I know that you use the Files app a lot, is, and this is going to be more of a system-wide change, but Apple is going to make it much easier to select multiple items at once and act upon them. So in Files, for example, right now you can tap on a file in the Files app and do something with it. But in iPadOS 16, you'll be able to select a couple, much like on your computer, you might select a couple of different documents and then do something to all of them at once. So it's these little bitty things, but for the power users, once you get used to them and they just become part of the regular everyday life for you, you'll just be able to be so much more efficient.
All right, next one that I know you were pretty excited about, but I'm still trying to get my head around is iCloud shared photo library, because I use iCloud photos all the time and I do shared albums, but this is a shared photo library.
Yeah. So you can tell me more about shared albums, because I don't have a lot of experience with them, but my understanding is that I don't think that shared albums are full quality, and it's sort of a specific album that you make for a specific purpose. The idea with the shared photo library is, right now, if you have a family, one person may have the master, the main iCloud photo library, but nobody else in the family can see those pictures on their iPhone or their Mac or their iPad, unless you share specifically with them, and then you each have your own your own library. So the idea here is everybody will now have, if you're using the family function in iCloud, you'll actually have access to two libraries: the one you've always had access to, the iCloud photo library, and then the family iCloud photo library, and you can designate individual pictures and say, this picture is not just going to be in my library, but it should also be in the family library. And other people in your family can do the same. And you end up having this separate library that everybody has access to with all these pictures. Now, it would be a pain if people had to manually move things over from one library to the other to share them. Indeed. And so Apple has come up with just a whole host of ways to make that seamless. One being that as you actually take the picture, there will be a switch in the camera app, much like you can turn the flash on and off, or you can turn live photos on and off. You'll be able to turn on and off whether this picture is going to automatically go to my family album. So let's say you're on vacation with the family. Every picture I'm taking this week is going to automatically go to the family album too. So everybody can instantly get those pictures as they come up. You can also optionally say, since Photos is smart enough to identify faces in pictures, it can tell me all the pictures of my son, all the pictures of my daughter, all the pictures of my wife. You could say, hey, anything that my wife, if my wife's in the picture, go ahead and put that in the family album. Or maybe if my wife and my son, or whatever combination you want to use, just automatically move those over. And then he can do it. And there's lots of those are just a couple of examples, but there's lots of other ways to do it to make it easier to get things into it. Now, as I'm describing all of this, the proof's in the pudding, right? So will this actually make things easier? Will it make it more complicated? I don't know. It's been an incredibly tough nut to crack of how do you share pictures with everybody. But at the same time, I don't want every picture that I ever take to be shared to my family. Something's personal or something's it's business related. I'm taking a picture of a document. My daughter doesn't need to see the picture of the contract I took a picture of, and so it's tough to decide. And so Apple is walking a very tough path. This is one of these things. It's not really a technological challenge as much as it is sort of a policy level challenge of what makes the most sense. So we'll have to see how this works, but people have been asking Apple to do this for so many years, and now we're finally there. So I can't wait to see how it works, and I can't wait to see how Apple iterates on it going forward.
I think I'm most excited about maybe the automated version of it, because I use the shared albums, but I have to manually share those pictures into what you were talking about with having a little toggle of some kind. I'm excited about that. That's good. Oh my goodness. Okay, continuing on here. The copy text and objects. We talked about that a little bit. We already talked about dictation there. Okay, so let's go back quickly. Here you did write about this. Handwriting straightening, or straightening the handwriting. When you are handwriting a note with the Apple Pencil, you said you can select what you wrote and then ask the iPad to automatically straighten your handwriting so that your notes look neater. Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see how that's going to work.
Me too, because when I first wrote this post, and I wrote this post the day after WWDC, I really didn't know how it was going to work. And then one of the things that I linked today in the news was a post by, I think it was by Juli Clover at MacRumors, if I remember correctly. But she's actually got the beta, and she said, it's not changing the penmanship of an individual letter. So if your F is really hard to read, it's not going to make that better. But what it will do is it will straighten things out. So as you handwrite, you tend to sort of curve, your hand sort of moves and curves, and things are not quite as nice. You'll be able to sort of straighten out the line so that the overall handwriting looks a little bit more neat. And you're showing an example of it on the screen right here. So
here's her story.
Another example of, I got to see it myself to see how well it works, but why not? I think it's a pretty cool idea of a feature. In fact, it's sort of cute. This article was posted on MacRumors, right? And I was just going through Twitter, last night, and I happened to see a woman that works at Apple, and she responded to the article and said, "I've been working on this feature for so long. I'm so excited everybody gets to use it." And it just reminds you that every one of these tiny little things, somebody has been working hours and days and months and weeks to get this feature, and and years. And so now we get to show it off. So for all of us that don't have the best handwriting in the world, maybe the iPad can help.
But I will tell you, just to bring it out just a little bit, I'm more excited about the fact that we have seen this over the years on the dictation side, dictating into editable text. And I got to tell you, ever since I've been showing off the iPad, and I know you too, Jeff, where I handwrite a note and I show people, look how great that is. They look at me and say, yeah, but can it convert into editable text?
Yeah.
And at first it couldn't. And I would look at him and say, why? You never did this before on your yellow legal pad. Why is that so important? But I got to tell you, now that the iPad is powerful enough, and you and I have been using Notability and GoodNotes for a long time that can do this, and the fact that I think the Notes app will do this automatically built in, just this whole thing about handwriting and how it's almost like I can handwrite or I can type, and it's almost not going to matter. Like, it's still going to be editable text. Anyway, that's just my sort of my big picture thought on that. But it was exciting about that. And then, okay, another thing that's related to this, there is a new app that Apple announced called Whiteboard. No, I'm sorry, not called Whiteboard, Freeform.
Yeah.
But that's what it looks like. It's like an unlimited digital whiteboard, which I know some people were making fun of. But the kicker here is that it is collaborative. That's the key part. I'm glad you wrote about this too.
Yeah. So if you're I've certainly been in situations where I've gotten ready for trial, and people get into a big room and people write down ideas, and you circle this one and you put this one on the side, and you put this, and you just sort of brainstorm. And so now you'll be able to do the same thing with an iPad app, that different people on their own devices can collaborate and add to things and erase things and circle things. I don't personally use whiteboards a lot in my, certainly never in my personal life, and only rarely in my law practice. But if whiteboards are something that are interesting to you, this will be a brand new feature. I believe this is one of the ones that Apple said is not going to come out with the first release of iPadOS 16.
Okay.
So, but it will be later this year. So, this might be one of the things that comes out around Thanksgiving or something like that. But we'll see.
And the collaborative aspect, just real quick, is very cool in the sense that wherever people are, you can see them writing or drawing on the whiteboard Freeform app in real time. But in addition to that, they also announced that some of the apps like Keynote and Pages, the Apple apps, will have that collaborative aspect on there as well. We already have that through, I still call it the iWork suite, right? But anyway, again, to me, that's the bigger picture kind of an outlook. What Apple is doing here is just making some of these apps a little more collaborative. And I think that's exciting as well.
Yeah. It's something that Google's always been very good at. Google Docs are fantastic for having different people around the world collaborate on a single document.
Exactly,
but
Jeff.
now Apple's taken some of that and adding some of that collaboration into its own stuff.
All right. The most important, I saved the best for last. The most important announcement that Apple made for the iPad is finally the weather app is coming to the iPad.
As I joked, it took them a dozen years to finally do this, but bravo, I guess. Better late than never. We've had it
for so long. It's so funny because people have been, clamoring about this. That and the calculator, right?
We still don't have a calculator.
Still don't have a calculator. Okay, my goodness gracious, are we done? Well, okay, two more quick things. We'll call this the crumbs. Of the Apple keynote, even though both of them are pretty important on here as well. How about Passkeys? we've talked about passwords, and we've talked about FIDO, which I forget what it stands for, Jeff, you know, but how about Passkeys this time?
Yeah, this is exactly, was it a month ago or 2 months ago for World Password Day? Apple announced that it was part of the FIDO allowance and that it was moving towards a passwordless future so that you didn't have to remember your username and password, but instead you could log into a website just using your Touch ID or your Face ID or whatever. And we talked about that. All that Apple really did this week was, first of all, reconfirm to the world that they are part of the FIDO Alliance. But then they also said, you know, we're pretty much ready. They said that the passkey, which is that's how this works. It's going to be in its first stages this fall when iOS 16 comes out. I'm not sure if this will be available on day one or a little bit later, but starting in just a few months, you will be able to decide for certain websites, for certain applications that you will not have to remember a password because there is no password. You will just log in using some universal identifier that's incredibly secure. And it does mean that you'll have to have your iPhone around to log in. And if you don't have it, there's other ways to get around it. And this is one of the complicated things that FIDO works on is what if you don't have your authenticator device with you? But it's no different than saying, what if I happen to forget my password? Well, you can't log in until you figure out your password. And so we're going to start to see the early stages of it. It's going to be, you and I talked about this weeks ago, Brett, it's going to be a long transition. There'll be a period of time where you have some things that are on one system and other things that are on the old password system, but you got to start somewhere. And Apple says, we're ready. Let's get into it.
I cannot find what FIDO stands for. I know we talked about this.
We did, and I
before.
Forget
I was thinking, well, you'll just be able to pull this right off the top of your head. I can't find it, but just know FIDO, and I keep thinking of a dog every time about that. But just know that that's going to be one of the acronyms that we'll all get to know. No one will ever know exactly what it stands for. Maybe we will. But FIDO is sort of that alliance that anyway, a lot of the big technology companies are signing on to. And that's great. And you also linked, by the way, to announcement from 1Password, our favorite password manager, that you and I have kind of been speculating, what is this going to do with password managers? But you had this great link here that hopefully 1Password is getting on the ball, right?
They joined the FIDO Alliance.
Joining up, yes.
FIDO, which of course stands for Fast Identity Online. I don't know why you didn't say that,
Of course it does.
Because I've always known that. I did not look that up on the internet just now. But they explain that they see password managers being a part of this future because they say you'll be able to use the 1Password app as your authenticator if you want to do so, which actually is interesting because it means you wouldn't have to necessarily have, because I could have 1Password on my iPhone and my iPad and my computer. And so maybe I have maybe that's even better. I need to think through how this works. But as they point out, you're going to have some websites that use the old system and some that use the new system. And so maybe password managers will still be incredibly relevant because they automatically know what you're using for each system and how you log in. So this is a brave new world. I mean, I would be so excited if 5 years from now, we look back at passwords, the same way that we look back at, dot matrix printers and a bunch of other stuff as, wow, remember when we used to use that stuff. So I'm very excited.
Last thing that I know both of us were very excited to see, CarPlay improvements. So Apple just mentioned a few things. Why don't you talk about, honestly, I was so excited about this, but I feel like I felt excited about this the first Knight Rider episode that I watched, right, with the kit car, because I was like, how cool is that? But I still don't have a kit car. I don't know how long it's going to take for these CarPlay improvements to come along, because there's a lot of car manufacturers out there that think that they have their own way to display information. But boy, would I embrace an all CarPlay screen in my car tomorrow if I could.
Yeah, what was interesting about this announcement is it sort of stood from all the other announcements. Apple was talking about things that we could use in just a few months, even things like passkeys. Even though we both know it's going to be a long time before FIDO is fully implemented, we'll at least start to be able to use it this fall. Whereas the big CarPlay announcement really requires to have brand new cars, new cars that have multiple screens, that have really large and wide and long screens. And I know that car manufacturers are going that way, and I'm sure you're going to start to see more and more of them, even this calendar year. But in many ways, what Apple was showing off with the CarPlay improvements, it's not the stuff that we're going to use this fall.
Yeah,
it might be the stuff that you start to use 3 years from now. or 4 years from now. But again, you have to start somewhere. And what's interesting to me is, up until now, CarPlay has been the way that you play your music in the car, right? It's just been, maybe maps to a few other things. But with this more advanced version of CarPlay is going to get more integrated into your actual car mechanics. It will show things like how fast you're going. It will be your speedometer. It will show how many miles you've gone. It will show, how much gas, are you empty? Are you full? Are you in the medium? all these things that it's going to get into the actual car specifics, which is really interesting because once you start tapping into this stuff, it's got to work, right? This can be mission critical. You can't not have a speedometer working. And so Apple's got to do this well, and I'm sure that they will, but it's going to have a beautiful interface. It'll be nice because in this future that Apple is promising us, you will be able to change the interface of your car. The one thing I've been thinking about since this announcement, Brett, is we've known for years that Apple is doing something with cars. The rumors, it's called Project Titan, I believe. And, people have speculated, is Apple making an operating system for cars? Is Apple making its own car? There's got to be a close connection between, as CarPlay gets more advanced, and whatever it is that they're doing on the, Project Titan side that Apple hasn't announced yet, they've got to be moving closer and closer to each other. Are we going to have a future where you can either buy a Honda that has a full decked out CarPlay experience, or you buy the Apple car, which also has the full decked out car experience? I don't know. It's fascinating. So this is one that it's fun to look at the pictures, and it's fun to speculate on what's coming in the future, but this is still a couple of years off before we really can understand. And we'll look back on this one day and say, oh, now I see where this is all going. But for now, it's just a sneak peek into the future.
I got to tell you, my thought, Jeff, is I just need to go and buy a shell from Honda or Toyota or somewhere, right? I just need the shell, because the CarPlay experience to me, just like you said, I just need a shell that has a blank screen, because when I plug in my phone or when I get into CarPlay, that's going to become my car, because I'm going to have all the screens are going to show. And the other thing quickly that I thought of on this is, there's already a lot of apps available out there that will connect into whatever that little car diagnostic plug is. It's like up under the steering wheel, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of apps that will allow you to get all kinds of information, because really cars today, all they are just rolling computers, right? I mean, there's a lot more to it to that, I know, but everything is really controlled by a computer. So I got to tell you, when I was listening to you and I've been thinking about this and rolling around in my head as well, it's going to take a while, but we're not that far away, because all I really need is just that shell to be able to plug in my phone, and then I'm going to have access to all the information I need about the car, not only immediately what's happening with like my speed and, how much gas that I have, all that kind of stuff, because I have access to all that information already, but also it'll allow me to control my interior, the coolness or the hotness. It'll allow me to control the entertainment, all of that stuff. I mean, it just needs to all come together. And I think I speculated this on this several months ago. What if the Apple car is really just that? Like, it's not a full, actual vehicle. It's just the experience of CarPlay. I have no idea if that's going to be true or not, but that's my thoughts.
Could be.
Very fun. Okay. Well, so for in the know, I hope I don't want to spoil anything, but instead of actual tips, I thought we could highlight the three things, the big takeaways. And this is easy for me because number one is this CarPlay. And again, you can already tell that I'm just kind of in the science fiction mode where I'm kind of thinking high thoughts about what CarPlay could mean. I know it's going to take a while. And it's really going to take a lot of elbow rubbing with the car manufacturers to get this right. But that's my number one pick. So I got three takeaways here. Editing and unsending messages. I already alluded to this. The fact that we can have the ability to edit our messages now on the phone or hopefully even on the Mac and the iPad as well is going to be absolutely fantastic. And I predict that is going to be something a lot of people will enjoy. And then I don't even think we talked about this, Jeff, but you mentioned it in your post, so I'll make sure, and then you linked to a couple of people that talked about this as well. Apple called this the continuity camera connector, to where you could use your iPhone as a camera if you are in a Zoom meeting as your webcam. Yeah, that's a better way to say it. That's incredible. They show this off because not only will it show the camera and look at you, but because there are 2 or 3 cameras built into the iPhone, one of the cameras has been customized so that it can look down at your desk in front of your computer, so that if you have like a note or a physical object that you want to show to the people on your Zoom meeting, you'll be able to see that. And that works with a Mac. That's what we joked about with a little holder before, because you can put your iPhone, literally have your iPhone sitting on top of your Mac. And this only works on Mac so far, although it won't surprise me if somehow maybe it'll come to Windows. Probably not in a long time. But you can set your phone on top of your MacBook or your computer, your Mac computer.
Your monitor,
yeah, thank you. And then it will act as a webcam, which I am thrilled. I got a brand new M1 MacBook Pro because it has a better camera built in, because I'm doing so many Zoom meetings. But my camera in my iPhone is even better than that. And I can't wait for that. That's great.
Yeah, that's the key.
And that's going to Sherlock some other apps as well. What we call
most
Sherlocking.
webcams suck. And even if you're lucky enough to have a good webcam, chances are the camera on your iPhone is even better. So all you need is a little way to hook it up on your monitor or on the back of your computer display, which is this little plastic device that Apple and Belkin work together, and Belkin's going to be selling. I'm sure it'll be cheap. And then you'll be able to use the high quality camera for anything that you use a camera for on your computer, whether it be a Zoom conference or, just taking pictures, anything that you would normally use a webcam for, you can get a better picture. And then, as you pointed out, because one of those cameras on the Apple phone is so ultra wide, you'll actually be able to take advantage of the fact that it can sort of look, it can actually see down because it's such a wide picture. And you might have like a display where one camera is on your face at the same time that you're describing to somebody on a YouTube video how to, make something with Legos. I don't know, I'm just making that up. And the other camera could just sort of just be looking at the Legos down there. And the real key to it, it's the camera can see that far down, but the real magic of it is to be able to stitch together what would be a pretty distorted image because it's at the very bottom of a lens, and to stitch it together to make it seem as if the camera was looking straight down. And I've heard 1 or 2 reports from people that have been testing it this week and say that sometimes it works well, sometimes it doesn't work as well, and it can only get down to like sort of your chest. It can't get to the table. I'm sure it depends upon the setup that you have, but hey, I mean, why not take advantage of the fact that you've got all these great cameras on the iPhone? It's really clever. I think I'd say, you're showing a picture of that little Belkin device right now. Yeah. I think it's great that Apple did this. Cool
Those
stuff.
are my picks: the CarPlay, editing and unsending messages, and the continuity camera. Your turn, Mr. Jeff.
So here's mine. It's Apple. Normally we think of in the know as being tips, but I think of like if you're trying to think of what do you want to know about the WWDC this week, what jumps out at me is that the iPad is going to become much more powerful for power users. Whether it's the customizable toolbars, whether it's the features that finally take advantage of the M1 processor, like Stage Manager and external displays. But Apple is just pushing the platform forward, making it much more powerful and accessible. You can get more done with it. I love that. I love that the home improvements. I love that not only just the new interface for the home app, but once we move into this future with Matter, that all of our HomeKit items can work together. I really think we'll be in a situation starting this fall, and then especially in a few years, where home accessory devices are vastly better than they were before. And it will all be traced back to iOS 16 and these significant changes. I'm very excited about the iCloud shared library. I have as many questions about that as I do, excitement, because I want to see how it works in practice. But I think it's a problem that Apple has known that it needed to solve for many years. I can't wait to figure it out. And then my last one is more of a question mark. And it's just this lock screen, because Apple, Apple thinks it has something special with the lock screen, right? They put a lot of emphasis into it. It's the most obvious new feature, and I think it's the one that when they come out with, if Apple came out with an ad for iOS 16, I think they would show off the lock screen. In fact, that's the video that I was talking about. That I had
even have a video, right?
Exactly. So, is this really going to be as useful as Apple is saying? It might actually be. I don't know. Or is it going to be a silly thing that you look at once and you're like, oh no, but I never really use that. It's much like we used to remember the ping service that Apple used to have in Apple Music as their social, which way will lock screens go? My hope is that it really is as useful as Apple thinks. And if so, then it's going to be a major step forward in the iPhone because it's a way of rethinking the lock screen. So those are the big takeaways that I see. And what a week. And we haven't even talked about everything. Wow. We haven't even talked about Apple Watch yet. We'll talk about that next week. We haven't even talked about next week. All of the developer sessions. I mean, there's so much more. So much.
Apple's Firehose. I love it. All right, indeed. Jeff. Yeah, we'll cut it off there, but man, more to come. Thanks for listening, everybody. And Jeff, we'll talk next week for sure.
Sounds good, Brett. Bye-bye, everybody.